Hello, in this video we're going to look at the Google form to complete all the information for the new client checklist and risk assessment. It's all in one Google form, but it's in two separate sections. So we'll just go through each question and just talk about what sort of things we want to be putting in there so that it makes more sense. So in this first question, we've got what's the name of the business? Fairly self-explanatory. If it's a limited company, state the full company name. If it's a sole trader, just put their trading name if they've got one, followed by their full name, their personal name. How did the client find us? Was it a referral from another client or referral from a partner, Google search, social media, anything other than them? It would be ideal to know how they found us. What's the name of the previous accountant? We won't necessarily have that at this point, but if we have got it, then pop it in there. If we don't have it just at the moment, just say not yet and make sure that the email with all the details of the previous accountant is popped into the permanent file alongside this form. Has the client shared their reasons for leaving their previous accountant? It's good to know what was going on there, whether it was a particular situation that caused a problem, or whether it was their previous accountant just closing down, or it was time to move on, or just anything that we've gleaned from conversations about why they might be leaving. Are we aware of any potential conflicts of interest with existing clients? I can't think of any examples right now, but so I would imagine for the vast majority of the clients that we take on, the answer to this will be no. But if we had two really hot competitors, maybe that were, it may be that we need to talk to our current client and see whether they're happy with us taking on their competitor. I would guess if they are hot competitors, then they wouldn't be. But that's worth thinking about. Are we dealing with the ultimate client and not an intermediary who is hiding their identity? So that's just understanding. I mean, that's kind of covered in the next few questions in terms of what's going on. I suppose something else that could be happening is you might have a limited company that we're being asked to act for, and in fact, there's another limited company behind it, which we wouldn't necessarily know at this point. But all the payments or sales are processed by the company we've been asked to act for, but the actual work is being done by another company behind. So it's just understanding how the company or how the business structure is and who's in control and all that sort of thing. If there's nothing really relevant to write, just say no, nothing relevant to comment here, or something like that. Who are the beneficial owners of the organization? Companies House should show us a lot of that, because we'll be able to see who, we'll be able to see the person who's registered with significant control and why they are, whether it's to do with shares or whether there's another reason for them having control. So anything we can find out from Companies House, pop in there. Describe the control and ownership structure of all the organization. Again, it will probably be fairly standard. Most of the companies that we take on will be owner managers, and the owner will also be the director. But if there's anything else other than that, then pop that in there. Have we written to the previous accountant for necessary information and obtained professional clearance? Obviously, if the answer to this one is no, then no, we haven't made that written that email yet. So just say no, we will do as soon as we get the information. If the potential client is in a regulated industry, have we inquired about its relationship with the regulatory authorities? So regulated industries could be anything like solicitors, or maybe another accountancy firm. I don't know why we'd be doing the accounts for another accountancy firm, but you never know. Travel industry, because they'll be regulated by the CAA, or what's the other one? I want to say BAFTA. No, I can't remember what it's called. And then rentals, estate agency is all regulated. So it's just finding out whether they've got a good relationship with their regulatory bodies. Have we ascertained and recorded the nature of the business, its source of funds and its economic purpose? So basically just talk about the business. If there's anything major to be concerned about, it's just information, I suppose, at this point. We're not expected to know everything about the company before we've even taken them on and worked with them. So it's just a basic outline of what the business does. Have we established whether the organisation is subject to money laundering regulations in its own right? So again, like an accountancy firm would be subject to money laundering, same as solicitors, most likely. I can't think of anything else right now, but we'll probably know. If it seems like it might, then just do a quick Google and find out whether it is, and ask the client as well. There's no problem with asking the client there. Has the client signed or agreed to sign necessary authorizations? This is about the 64-8 forms, and they can be created by through TaxCalc. As soon as we've added the client into the TaxCalc system, it will pre-populate the 64-8 forms for us, so we don't have to sit there filling yet more forms out. Just get the client into TaxCalc, and then we can create them. Either a wet signature if we're seeing them in person, or we can do an electronic signature through Signatory. We will do mainly online authorizations through HMRC, but it is useful to have a signed 64-8 on file should HMRC decide that they're not going to talk to us just with the online authorization. They should, but they're a bit persnickety with that. So if we've got the signed 64-8 on file, then we can just throw that at them and go, now talk to us. Have we the necessary skills and resources to act for this client? Chances are, if we've gone through the process of quoting for them and we've got this far in the process, we probably have, but it's just to make sure that the client isn't needing the world and we've only got half a world. Are there any factors that threaten the firm and or individuals regarding integrity, objectivity and independence? If so, explain the necessary safeguards put in place. I can't think of any examples on this now regarding integrity, objectivity and independence. To a certain extent, at this stage in the game, like for some of the other questions, you're not necessarily going to know. And to be honest, again, like some of the other questions, if there was any concern around these areas that we're aware of by this point, we may not be going forward anyway. But if anything does make sense to put as an answer in here, given the particular client we're looking at, then yeah, pop it in there. Have we assessed the integrity of the owners, directors and management of the business? Similar question to that. Are they do they have integrity? If you're happy with it, then just say yes, no issues. Is the proposed fee adequate to enable the cost of the anticipated work to be recovered? Again, we're quoting for clients through Go Proposal. That's all been considered when we set up Go Proposal, so we shouldn't be getting this far if we haven't considered all of that. Sufficient knowledge. Oh, this is just the sign-off section, so it needs to be completed by the engagement partner. So you just need to go on to the next section. What I should have done as I go through here, these are all required, so you need to write something into each one. Don't just put random letters in like I am, because that's not very helpful. If you need to, just put NA, not applicable, something. I'm just doing this so that I can click next, because unless I've filled them out, you can't click next. Right, so this is the AML risk assessment. So obviously we're looking to assess the risk of money laundering and to establish the extent of the client due diligence that we need to undertake. So instructions, the first word in each answer needs to be a yes or a no. A yes answer indicates increased risk. So if this is not the case, please explain further within the box. By box, I just mean your little answer field there. So first section is about the client. Is the client outside our normal type of client? We have quite a range of normal clients. So if it's particularly odd, like maybe a dry cleaners, we might want to say something here, otherwise, no. In fact, you know what, I'm going to do this as I go through this time. I learn my lesson. Is the sector in which the client operates in any way unusual for us? Again, we've got quite a few people in quite a few sectors, but if there is something particularly odd, then put it in there. If not, the answer is no. Is there anything unusual regarding the client's geographic location and their choice of us as accountants? We've taken on clients up in Newcastle and we're based in Hampshire, so there isn't anything inherently unusual about being in a different part of the country, using all the online tools that we have available now. It's not like it was 10 years ago where people generally used accountants that were in their local area. That's not really relevant in today's world, but if they're based in, I don't know, New Zealand, there may well be something slightly unusual, but you can say, yes, they're based in New Zealand, but this is why, and this is why they need a UK accountant and blah, blah, blah. So just explain why if that's not the case. Where appropriate, do we have concerns as to why we've not been able to physically see the client face to face? So for any AML and identification procedures we go through, we are going to be looking to either meet the person in person, face to face, or we're going to do a video call. If we've not been able to do either of those, you're going to want to write something there because that would be a concern. At the very least, we should be able to do a video call with somebody, even if it's a 2-minute WhatsApp call, just to confirm that they look like the person that we've received ID for, and they seem to be the right person, and just have a little chat with them, make sure that they're aware of who we are and what we're doing. Is the client known to be potentially involved in illegal activities? You'll get an idea about that. They're obviously not going to sit there and tell you that they do all this stuff that's illegal, but you'll get an idea whether it feels like they're hiding something. Is the client a politically exposed person? For the most part, we probably won't be taking on politically exposed people, but we'll find that out through the ID checks. So you'll know the answer to that. Has the client been in any way obstructive or evasive when asked for information regarding ownership, the business undertaken, or any other information we require? So do you feel like they've been hiding something is the basic question there. If not, then no. If yes, then explain what it is. Is there any doubt regarding, oh yeah, this is about the nature of the assignment. So we've moved on from the client now, we're looking at what we're being asked to do. Is there any doubt regarding the services the client requires? If you've got any doubts, write what your doubt is. If not, then write no. Are these services outside our normal range of services? So are they asking us to do anything we don't normally do for other clients? Does it appear in any way unexpected for this client to ask us to provide these services? For the most part, this is going to be no, no, no. Is there anything unusual regarding the services required? I feel like that's the same question really, but there we go. Is there any reason to believe that the services or products requested lend themselves to money laundering or terrorism financing? Again, if it's high cash that the company deals with, then potentially you might want to think about it. But to be fair, we have a lot of pubs on our books, and well, certainly before COVID, they would have used cash a lot. So that in itself doesn't lead us to believe that there's money laundering going on. But if there's anything else that suggests that there might be something dodgy going on, then maybe write something in there. Will we be required to handle client money for this client? We don't have a client account with the bank, and we're not equipped to handle client monies. So if they do have a requirement for us to be handling any money, you do need to come and talk with the director before continuing. because that would be a concern. We're not covered in any way, shape or form. There's a lot that we have to do, a lot of boxes we have to tick in order to handle client monies and have a client account. There's a lot more financial governance to go on with that. So we do need to be careful not to be taking on any work that expectation would be held of us. At the moment, that may change in the future, but at the moment we can't. Are we providing investment, trust or company services for this client? If we are likely to, then we just need to be aware that any arrangement of that sort may well facilitate money laundering. And if we're facilitating money laundering, that's a criminal offence. So obviously we just need to be careful that we're not doing anything that can help that. If you think there's anything there that needs to be investigated, then just pop it in there. Then we've going on to the organizational environment of the company. So this is sort of internal controls. What's the company doing internally? Have they got processes and balances and checks that are in place to make sure that things are correct? So starting off with drugs, do the activities of the client involve countries where the production of drugs, drug trafficking, corruption or terrorism may be prevalent? For the most part, most of our clients will be dealing majorly primarily with the UK. I think at the moment we've only got one client that deals with a couple of European countries, and that's about the extent of it. But if they are likely to be like Mexico or, I don't know, some of the countries in Africa, then we may be wanting to be aware of some problems there. Does the client have any links with any non-cooperating countries or jurisdictions with a higher risk of money laundering or terrorist financing, listed on the Financial Action Task Force or HM Treasury websites? Those are the two websites that you need. You'll probably have a gut feeling about some of the countries, but just click through to the website and it'll tell you whether that is a country to be concerned about. Is money moved between different accounts, institutions or jurisdictions without apparent reason? Now, obviously money will move around. It's just if there seems to be a lot of transactions moving money around that don't seem to have any point. Again, I don't know if you would know that at this point before even taking the client on. It might not be obvious if there is. So just best understanding, based on best understanding at this point in time. Are we aware of any history of loss-making transactions that have occurred without a logical explanation? So, for example, if you had a client buy a van for £20,000 and then sell it 3 months later for £5,000, you might ask a few questions of that. Again, not necessarily something that you would be aware of at this point, but if there has been anything that has suggested anything to look into, then pop it in there. Is there any funding in place that lacks logical explanation? So maybe a company who has 100,000 sat in a savings account might then take a loan out for £7,000. Seems a little bit odd. Why would you pay interest on a loan when you've got £100,000 sitting in the bank account? That would lack a logical explanation. There might be a logical explanation, but it would just be a question of asking the client at that point and finding out. Is this a cash-based organisation? Again, we've got a lot of pubs that are relatively cash-based. If that's the answer, and yes, a client does use a lot of cash, then just say yes. And then if they've got internal controls, being careful of the cash and we can see that it's being used responsibly and there's nothing to be concerned about, then just write something along those lines there, because that may be enough to push them into high risk, above normal risk. If there isn't any internal controls and they seem to be very, very loose on cash and don't have a clue, then yes, we may actually need to put them into high. So it's not just that they're cash and they're low. Cash, if they're not looked after properly, then it could be high as well. So just put the idea of what you're thinking in here. We do review this periodically, so if we don't catch something during this first run through, we will likely catch it in future risk assessments. Are there concerns as to whether there are genuine reasons for the business handling cash? Are there concerns as to whether there are genuine reasons for the business handling cash? Yeah, so do you have any concerns, basically? Do items of stock include attractive and portable consumer goods? Obviously, the concern there is that they've been stolen, fallen off the back of a lorry, and they're being resold. Does the client have any strategic alliances with any other suppliers or customers? I'm not entirely sure what that's actually after. Does the client have any strategic alliances with other suppliers or customers? I think it's not necessarily that there is a problem with having strategic alliances there. It's just that we're aware of them. And if that does represent an issue, then obviously we need to write it in there and decide whether that's enough to push it into high risk. Yeah. Does the client often use temporary staff? The risk here being if they've got lots of temporary staff coming in and out, that means lots of change, meaning people, if there was something dodgy going on within the company, that there was a lot of theft or something happening within their company, temporary staff wouldn't see much of a pattern going on, so would be less likely to raise any issues. Obviously, just because there's lots of temporary staff doesn't mean there is an issue, but any issues would be less likely to be picked up than if you had a lot of long-standing staff. Risk of fraud, theft and error. Are there any reasons to question the honesty and integrity of the client? That's fairly bog standard. Does available information indicate that the personal financial situation of the management is threatened by the organization's financial performance? That's going to be a gut feeling at this point, I would imagine. So just answer what you feel. Where appropriate, does the owner manager draw no distinction between the personal and business transactions? So basically that's, does the owner use the business account as their own personal bank account? Yeah, we need to be aware of people that do that, because that's where lines get blurry. Are we aware of any personal financial obligations of management or employees with access to assets susceptible to theft? Yeah, so small, very valuable assets, where maybe they've got loads of them. Again, we probably wouldn't be aware of this during the initial take on of the client. But if anything has been said or suggested, or you've seen anything that might suggest anything wrong here, then just make a note of it. Are there any adverse relationships, e.g. known or anticipated future employment layoffs between the business and the employees with access to assets susceptible to theft? So again, that's about the personal financial obligations. This is about any adverse relationships. Do the employees or the management of the client have a negative relationship with the business? So yeah, anything that you've seen or heard that might indicate that. Are we aware of any history of fraud, theft or error within the business? Yeah, that's it's fairly obvious what it's after there. For the most parts, we may not, well, if we were aware of anything, we wouldn't have got to this point. So we're probably not aware of anything, but it's just to make you think about it, I suppose. Are there any adverse characteristics or circumstances, e.g. large amounts of cash on hand, which may increase the susceptibility of assets to misappropriation? Yeah, so just being aware, have a look around if the client's got premises, just see if there's anything that piques your interest that might be relevant here. Are supervisory controls over the business lacking? So the people that are in charge, do they seem to not be particularly interested in what's going on in the business, leaving it potentially open to fraud, theft, or error? Are there adequate internal controls over assets susceptible to misappropriation? So this could be cash, it could be anything really that's got any value. Anything that has value, are they being looked after? So is cash being locked away, and that sort of thing, if you've seen anything up until this point. Is there a disregard for the need for internal control over misappropriation of assets? So again, that's to do with the actual internal control. This is about not caring. If you ask if there's internal controls and they go, oh, it's okay, I trust my staff, there's nothing to worry about there, that's more of a disregard, because anybody will be, or anybody can be pushed to take something that isn't theirs when they're in dire need. And while they might not be in dire need right now, in 6 months' time, they might be. And they might be inclined to do something that would be against their normal nature. So just to disregard the need for a safe for your cash is just silly, really. Do management or staff with access to assets susceptible to theft appear dissatisfied with the entity or its treatment of employees? So yeah, that's about whether the management or staff don't like the business, and they've got access to assets that could be nabbed. Does available information indicate that there is a significant number of non-routine or non-systematic transactions at the period end? Again, we might not know about that at this point. If we have, and it just looks very odd, then just mention something there. Laws and regulations, this is the last section, and only a few questions. Are there any laws and regulations central to the ability of the business to conduct its operations? Obviously, you've got companies law and employment law and all that sort of thing, but is there anything else that might be relevant to this particular business that would impact its ability to do business? That might be more of a question for your client, for our client, just to find out a little bit more, find out whether there's any laws that allow them or don't allow them to do what they're doing. Is the business currently undergoing or anticipating an external investigation, for example, by HMRC? Again, that's just going to be a question. Is there a known history of violation of laws and regulations or claims against the business alleging fraud? Google searches would be quite good to find out that sort of thing, because if that's been an issue before, there may be something that was noted in the papers, in which case there'll be articles about it that you can find on Google, and anything the client might say, not necessarily something you would ask directly, but there might be something that you can that comes up in conversation that gives a suggestion that there might have been something happening in the past. Obviously, just one thing isn't necessarily a known history, it's just something happened. Yes, at some point we might like to get a bit more information about that, but it doesn't necessarily mean there's a pattern and there's a problem with it. So the final conclusion is, as a result of the above, we consider that the risk of money laundering or terrorist financing is, and you can choose either normal or high. If you choose that it's normal, in other words, most of these answers are going to be no. Where there is a yes, we've got a reason why it's not actually pushing it up into high risk. Then you would select normal, and then we can do the normal client due diligence form. If you've got a yes in there and it's just a higher risk and it's a concern, not necessarily it's a concern that we don't want to take the client on, but it's a concern that we just want to keep a little bit of a better eye on things to make sure things are okay, then we'll click high, and then we'll complete the enhanced client due diligence form. So depending on which one you choose here will depend on how you complete the next two forms. The next form is the one about the company, and the final form is the one about the individual. Obviously, if or the company or business, I suppose. No, it is the company. Oh, let me check. Organization. Yeah, I think it's a company identity checklist. And then there's the individual identity checklist. And at the beginning, it'll ask you if you want to complete the normal level of client due diligence or whether you need to do the enhanced. Enter your name and date in there. And then that one, obviously, you can see that there isn't a little star on that one. That one needs to be completed by the engagement director. So if you just click submit, then our internal processes and automation will make that part of things happen, and that will be signed off by an engagement director who will be in touch with you if they need any more information, or I need any more information. All right, I hope that makes plenty of sense, but if there's anything you're not sure about, just ask the question. There's not a problem with asking questions. I'd rather you ask questions than just guess and leave out something that's potentially useful or very, very relevant later on. All right, I stop talking now. Thank you, bye.